There was a time when most of the world was still unknown to many, and there was no higher calling than being an explorer. A few brave and curious adventurers ventured into the deepest, darkest corners of the earth, hoping to shed light on these uncharted regions. However, this was a dangerous job, and many of these individuals never returned. From a record-breaking mountaineer to an adventurer searching for a city that didn't exist, the fates of these explorers are still shrouded in mystery. Let's dive into the stories of explorers who roamed the planet and never came back. Gaspar and Miguel Corte-Real. In 1500, Gaspar Corte-Real became one of Portugal's most talented explorers when he led an expedition to Greenland, thinking he was heading to the Far East. The following year, he made another trip with his brother, Miguel. After reaching Greenland and possibly Newfoundland, 2 of the 3 ships in the fleet made it back to Portugal, including the one commanded by Miguel. However, Gaspar's ship never returned. When Miguel realized his brother was missing, he set out on a rescue mission. They searched the area but found nothing. Once again, all the ships in the fleet, except one, returned to Portugal. This time, it was Miguel's ship that never came back. Gaspar and Miguel Corte-Real represent the bold spirit of 16th century Portuguese explorers. Although their expeditions didn't succeed, Gaspar's quest for Greenland and Miguel's subsequent rescue mission show the immense value of perseverance. Their absence in such a vast and unexplored world left a lasting mark of sorrow in the history of navigation. Amelia Earhart. Aviation pioneer Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan disappeared on July 2, 1937. It was her second attempt to become the first pilot to circumnavigate the globe along the equator. Neither their bodies nor their plane were ever found. Earhart was declared dead on January 5, 1939. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart remains one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Her relentless pursuit to achieve the impossible and be the first woman to fly around the world was a reflection of her desire to break gender barriers and prove that women could conquer the skies. Her courage and ambition still serve as a symbol of pioneering spirit, even though her fate remains unknown. Vandino and Ugolino Vivaldi. In 1291, another pair of brothers vanished during their travels. In search of a passage to Asia, the Genoese brothers Vandino and Ugolino Vivaldi's expedition was never seen again after they entered the Mediterranean Sea through the Strait of Gibraltar. Although their journey was technically a failure, it wasn't in vain. The mistakes the Vivaldi brothers made helped lay the groundwork for more successful voyages in the future. Though the Vivaldi brothers' expedition didn't succeed, it highlighted the risks and challenges of medieval navigation. They were searching for a route to Asia, and while they didn't find success, their attempts helped pave the way for future explorations, showcasing the relentless spirit that drove medieval voyages. Naomi Uemura. On February 13, 1984, Japanese adventurer Naomi Uemura, 43, disappeared while climbing Mount Denali in Alaska, formerly known as Mount McKinley. A thrill seeker since childhood, Uemura wasn't an amateur explorer. He became the first person to reach the North Pole solo and also the first person to cross the Amazon River by raft. Naomi Uemura, one of Japan's boldest adventurers, made history by becoming the first person to cross the Amazon solo and reach the North Pole. His skills and physical endurance were remarkable, and his disappearance on Mount Denali left a gap in the records of great human achievements. But his courage continues to inspire explorers. Jean-François de Galaup, Count of La Pérouse. La Pérouse was a French naval officer and explorer, having a successful naval career since he was 15. In 1785, he was appointed by King Louis XVI of France to lead a scientific expedition around the world. La Pérouse arrived in Australia in 1788, but after leaving Botany Bay, his fleet vanished. It wasn't until 1826 that an Irish captain, Peter Dillon, found evidence of La Pérouse's fate. Near the island of Vanikoro, he discovered anchors and other wreckage later confirmed to be from La Pérouse's 2 ships. However, the Count's remains were never found. The disappearance of Count La Pérouse in 1788 remains a fascinating enigma. His scientific expedition around the world was marked by discoveries and cultural exchange. Despite his tragic fate, the remains of his fleet found in 1826 added another layer of historical tragedy to a man whose pioneering work resonated through the decades. John Franklin. In 1845, explorer John Franklin left Britain with more than 100 crew members in search of the Northwest Passage, a sea route made up of a series of straits in Northern America, above the Arctic Circle, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. His 2 ships, HMS Terror and HMS Erebus, disappeared in the Canadian Arctic. For more than 150 years, it was believed that the ships and their crews had vanished without a trace. Then, in 2014, archaeologists from the Inuit community and Parks Canada discovered the wreck of the Erebus in Victoria Strait. The remains of the HMS Terror were found 2 years later off King William Island. John Franklin is remembered for his ambition to find the Northwest Passage, but his Arctic expedition ended in tragedy. For over a century, his disappearance fueled theories and stories of survival until, in 2014, traces of his expedition were found. His name became synonymous with tragedy and Arctic exploration. Eudoxus of Cyzicus. Eudoxus of Cyzicus was a Greek explorer who failed to circumnavigate Africa from Europe in the 2nd century BC. And although he wasn't the only one to attempt the journey, he may have been the first to get lost trying. Eudoxus had already made 2 successful trips to India via the Red Sea. However, when he was returning from his second journey, he was thrown off course, possibly disappearing somewhere along the east coast of Africa. Eudoxus of Cyzicus was one of the first to attempt to sail around Africa, but his expedition was interrupted, possibly by the fury of the sea. Although his failure wasn't in vain, he remains a forgotten historical figure whose efforts helped pave the way for other explorers. His attempt illustrates the boldness required to face the unknown. Percy Fawcett. Unlike many other explorers, British geographer Percy Fawcett searched for something that had never been proven to exist. In the early 20th century, he became convinced of the existence of an ancient city deep in the Amazon rainforest. In the 1920s, Fawcett organized several expeditions with the goal of locating the city he called Z. During his last expedition in 1925, Fawcett disappeared along with his son, Jack, and one of Jack's friends, Raleigh Rimmel. Percy Fawcett is a legendary figure whose efforts to find the mythical city Z in the Amazon captured the imagination of many. His quest and the mysterious disappearance with his son in the early 20th century continue to fuel theories about lost cultures and the vast, unexplored expanse of the jungle which still holds its secrets. Roald Amundsen. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen led the first successful expedition to navigate the Northwest Passage by boat in 1905. In 1911, a team he led became the first to reach the South Pole. Amundsen disappeared on June 18, 1928, while flying on a rescue mission for the Italia airship in the Arctic. Parts of his aircraft were later found, indicating that it had crashed into the Barents Sea. However, his remains were never recovered. Roald Amundsen was one of the greatest explorers of the 20th century, famous for his conquest of the South Pole. His ability to adapt to the harsh conditions of the Arctic was tested when he disappeared in 1928 during a rescue mission. The impact of his South Pole expedition still resonates in the world of scientific and geographical discoveries. George Bass. British sailor George Bass discovered the strait between the Australian mainland and the island state of Tasmania, Bass Strait. However, he's even more famous for disappearing during a trip to South America. What happened to Bass remains a mystery. He left Port Jackson, Australia, aboard the ship Venus in 1803 but was never seen again. George Bass, known for discovering Bass Strait, became an enigmatic figure after disappearing on a trip to South America. His contribution to Australian exploration is immense, but what really happened to him after he left remains a mystery, making him one of the most puzzling figures of the 19th century. John Cabot. John Cabot, Giovanni Caboto, was an Italian navigator who became one of the first Europeans to reach the North American coast after the Vikings. Hired by King Henry VII of England in 1497, Cabot discovered a newfound land, now known as Newfoundland in Canada. After returning to England to report his success, Cabot embarked on a final expedition in 1498, but was never seen again. John Cabot, one of the first Europeans to explore North America, had a brief career marked by the boldness of his feats. His 1498 expedition was his last, and his disappearance left a gap in the history of early exploration. Although his name is associated with the discovery of new lands, what really happened to him was never clarified. Henry Hudson. Henry Hudson was an English maritime explorer and navigator who gave his name to Hudson Bay, the Hudson River, and some other places. Best known for his explorations of present-day Canada and parts of the northeastern U.S., Hudson disappeared in 1610 after struggling to find the Northwest Passage to Asia. Henry Hudson, in search of the Northwest Passage, disappeared in 1610 with his crew. His attempt to link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans was a massive ambition, and his disappearance in the icy waters of the Arctic became one of the greatest mysteries of maritime exploration. His story continues to reflect the dangers of venturing into the unknown. Ludwig Leichhardt. German scientist and explorer Ludwig Leichhardt led several expeditions in Australia. Once he was even declared dead and only returned 18 months later, safe and sound. In 1848, Leichhardt embarked on his final expedition, intending to cross the Australian desert from east to west. However, this time, he was never seen again. Ludwig Leichhardt was known for his skill in exploring the vast and inhospitable Australian lands. His final journey in 1848, when he vanished in the desert, remains one of the greatest mysteries in Australian exploration. Leichhardt's legacy, however, lives on in the relentless pursuit of the unknown and the drive to continue despite the risks. Peng Jiamu. Peng Jiamu was a Chinese biologist who disappeared during an expedition in the desert in 1980. Since the 1950s, he had participated in several scientific expeditions to the Lop Nor Desert in northwestern China, often described as one of the driest places on Earth. In 1980, Peng led a team of biologists, geologists, and archaeologists to Lop Nor. However, several days after the trip, he disappeared from his camp after leaving a note saying he was going to look for water. Peng Jiamu, a Chinese biologist, vanished during a scientific mission in Lop Nor Desert in 1980. His expedition, which aimed to study the region's fauna and geology, ended with his mysterious disappearance. His legacy serves as a reminder of the challenges and dangers that explorers face, especially in extreme and unforgiving environments. Disappearing into the unknown might seem like the end, but for these adventurers, maybe it was just the start of a different kind of journey. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We've got plenty more mysteries coming your way. See you next time.